We are live.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to Flattening the Curve, Aftershocks for the attraction industry. And my name is Scott Swenson. I'm going to be the moderator of this panel discussion. And just to give you a little bit about my background, I'm a consultant for theme parks and zoos and aquariums, working primarily on entertainment and communication. I've been in the theme park industry for, over 30 years now. And I'm kind of the low man on the totem pole in this panel because we've got some incredible people here who are here to share their thoughts. Before I introduce them, I just want to very quickly run through what the intent of this and some of the other panels that I'll be moderating later in the day are for and are all about. The idea here is the COVID-19 situation has hit us all very, very seriously. And for many of us just recently, incredibly seriously. And so we wanted to make certain that we were able to have these kinds of open discussions so that you can hear from industry experts, their views, their thoughts, and kind of what's happening, what can happen, and perhaps even what should happen. None of the panelists today in any of the panels will be sharing any sort of proprietary information. This is all about theory. This is all about giving organizations the opportunity to tout those wonderful things that they have done in this weird sort of redefining time, and also to hopefully put at ease some of the angst and trauma that I think people are feeling in regards to this particular situation. So that's kind of the idea. We do have some prepared questions, which may spark additional discussion. So hopefully you're all listening, and I want to thank you all for joining us. And speaking of thanking them for joining this, it's a perfect segue for me to introduce the panelists on this particular panel discussion. The first person I would like to introduce, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you with your title, and then if you would please fill in a little bit of your background so that the listeners can understand as we discuss things, your point of view and your perspective. Because again, we've got some industry heavy hitters here, and I just think it's important for everybody to understand who everyone is so that they know, gosh, I should really listen to them because they're very smart and experienced people. So first, the panelist I'd like to introduce is Amber Christopher. She is the Senior Vice President for Guest Experience at the Denver Zoo. Hey, Amber, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. So I am with Denver Zoo. I've been there for about 15 years. We host about 2.2 million guests a year and are Colorado's biggest tourist attraction. The team that I lead includes all of our earned revenue efforts, facilities, maintenance, guest operations, and anything that you would kind of see, on a day-to-day visit to our campus.
Excellent. So you're very much anything the guests see at the Denver Zoo, that's you and your team.
And all that behind the scenes stuff to make it all happen, right?
That's amazing. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. Our next panelist is the Director of Entertainment Productions at ZooTampa at Lowry Park, Alex Crow.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex. I've been with ZooTampa only about 2 months right now, but my position there is to come in and help with all of the consumer events that we do there, such as our Creatures of the Night Halloween event, our Christmas in the Wild event. Currently running is our Dinos Alive event. Was currently running. And it's my job to then craft those, find all the budgeting for it, then figure out the operations for it, how we're going to be successfully putting it in front of guests. And in addition to that, it's my job to help kind of curate and clean up our presentations for our educators that do our tram rides and our animal interactions within the park, and also our animal venture show in the park as well. And my history, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you, you mentioned your history. In all transparency, I've known Alex for many, many years. And since you've only been with ZooTampa for a relatively short time, can you tell people a little bit about your previous employers?
Yeah.
That'll give them a better perspective on where your head's at.
Right. So I started way back in 2000 as a performer with the SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment company. And I did that for about 6-7 years before I moved into their management side of things, and I took over their consumer events operations, working with Scott Swenson. So my job during that time frame from about 2007 to 2016 was to do all the budgeting and operations of the events and be a bug in Scott's ear for the creative and what would and wouldn't work. And then after I did that at Busch Gardens Tampa till 2014 and at Busch Gardens Williamsburg from 2014 to 2016. And then I spent the last 3 years with Carnival Cruise Line, kind of changing industries, but the same kind of entertainment vibe, managing their guest entertainment program, and enrichment, which is all the comedians and the variety acts you see performing on board and any of the lecturers and speaking series that we feature on board the Carnival ships. So it was my job to cast, manage, and basically polish anything that we saw on board of the Carnival ships for the last 3 years, and now ZooTampa.
So basically, you've worked in every one of the hot spots that has been hit by COVID-19.
Yeah, very much so. And because I deal with everything with humor, I like to say I got out of the cruise industry at the perfect time.
And now here you are in the zoo industry. So there you go. And our third panelist is somebody else who I've known for quite some time, Mr. Todd Hougland, who is the Senior Director for Design and Development with Ripley Entertainment. Todd, tell us a little bit about what you do at Ripley's and of course, your illustrious career.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Good morning, good afternoon to all of our participants. At Ripley's Entertainment, I'm based here in Orlando in the headquarters and overseeing a team of designers that's doing small renovations to brand new attractions around our global attractions markets. We're looking at our Ripley's Believe It or Not, our aquariums, mirror mazes, haunted adventures, you name it, all of those various brands that fall under the Ripley's overarching brand. My background, over 30 years in the theme park and attractions business. Most recently, I was in Hong Kong for about 14 years. Working at Ocean Park Hong Kong. I was the executive director for operations and entertainment, and I had the great fortune to work with a team to develop a massive Halloween event, one of the first ones in Asia that grew to one of the largest Halloween events in Asia, as well as a number of other seasonal events. So it's exciting to bring some of the operational experience that I have in theme parks to what I'm doing now at Ripley's and kind of that midway attraction and looking at the design side.
So as our listeners can see, and our listeners just keep growing, so thank you all for joining us. As our listeners can see, these are all very experienced people in the industry. So let's just dive right into some of the questions. And panelists, if you have an answer, please go ahead and start, and hopefully the rest of us will be paying enough attention that we'll shut up and let you talk. So the first question, and I think it's a big one. It's, what have the large attractions been doing both internally and guest facing to keep moving forward during the most recent closures? Because I think we're all in a state of either completely reduced hours or complete closure. So what are all of your organizations doing in this interim period?
Well, I'll jump in. we're all kind of waiting to see who wants to go first, but certainly all of our Ripley's attractions around the globe are currently closed, and we're obviously very concerned about our staff, our animals in a number of our facilities, and we're looking at how we can maintain those, do some of those repair and maintenance projects while the attractions are closed, if it permits, and in some cases we can because of the situation in those particular markets, and others we can't, and our staff are staying home except for those essential that need to be there for the animals. And we're looking at our capital projects. What can we move forward with? We do have a team of designers that are working remotely at the moment, but putting forth projects that we think will help us as soon as we reopen, so that we're better positioned to get back into the market and entertain those guests who are used to seeing the fun and crazy stuff that we do at Ripley's.
That's great. Alex, I know you were diving in there as well. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Todd said is what we're dealing with on the animal side of things. ZooTampa has recently gone to essential staff only to maintain the health and safety of the animals inside the park. What we were doing in the interim, when we were closed now, we're going on 2 weeks, but for the first week we had full staff on board still. So we were utilizing that time to rehearse and practice. We are working on our animal show there. So we use that time with no guests to really pull the animals out and the ambassadors out to focus on new behaviors and start utilizing that time with no guests to be able to put a product together for when they come back. They can be really impressed at all the homework the animals did. But we've recently switched to just essential staff. So anybody that's out there listening that be worried about any of our animals, for all of us here on the panel, please know the animals are at the forefront of our thinking, and they're taking priority when it comes to where we're spending our money and where we're making sure we stay on top of things. So just to assuage anybody that might be concerned about the animals in zoos, and Amber will probably say the same thing, we're taking care of them to the best of our ability. And if you've seen any of the videos that zoos are posting, including ZooTampa, you're seeing the animals are able to get out and do things they don't normally get to do. We just had Pierce, our porcupine, roaming the park the other day and going to say hi to all the other animals, which was really fun to video and show to everybody. So we're trying to keep people engaged while we're not working via video and YouTube and social media. And then we're utilizing the other time just to kind of prep ourselves, like Todd said, to be able to come back to the market and be able to give people entertainment. They're going to be cooped up for 2, 3, 4 weeks at this point, and they're going to want to get out and do things, and we want to make sure we give them fun things to do.
Excellent. Amber, you want to tag on to that one?
Yeah, so all of those things that Alex and Todd have mentioned, and absolutely animals are taking our top priority here at Denver Zoo as well. So we mentioned the experiences with the animals during the day. So we have created something called Zoo to You that's done every day, really from an education angle, utilizing our education teams to help parents as they're working at home with their kiddos who are out of school. So what does that look like? We also recently had a baby rhino, who's the cutest thing ever if you haven't seen her yet. But we have a naming contest that we've put out there too, is really just trying to get the message out that, hey, we're still here, animals are still here, we're taking great care of them and moving forward. Lots of cost-cutting measures, obviously, that we've had to implement over the last week or so. We definitely were in the news a couple days ago for layoffs and furloughs and so forth that we had to implement as well, which is always tough to do for all of us. And then really now it's the focus moving forward of what it looks like to reopen, and how do we envision the way that we do work, and can we take this opportunity to make some changes we've been talking about for a long time, but it was just too hard. And so really just how do we kind of turn that visit on its head and really change things up?
It's so funny because I know that so many of us in the industry will often say, boy, I wish I only had the time to dedicate to this new project that we've been working on. And it's one of those, be careful what you ask for, because
Right.
you just might get it, a lot of you, you're all echoing the same thing. And I think this is true throughout the industry. Has there been any, I know that you've mentioned some social media outreach. Has there been anything specific that has been done to maintain the brand and keep your guests engaged in your zoo or your attraction that has been ramped up? Because I know one of my clients is the Florida Aquarium here in Tampa. And I know that they are working diligently to continue to ramp up their social media presence and keep people engaged, and to keep families educated and intrigued about their product during this downtime. Do any of you have any of those kinds of products and projects that are out there that people can know about so that they can go and check them out and continue to learn while we're all, home sequestered?
Yeah, at ZooTampa.org, we put up a kids corner. So it's a section that's on the website that not only features content that ZooTampa ambassadors are creating, but it also is curated educational material. So it kind of ties into what Amber was saying when they're ramping up education for their social media. But we just rolled that out 2 or 3 days ago, and it's a place for parents to go and grab coloring books and activities and see videos and have educational talks with, we filmed educational talks with our team at the zoo. And also, since we have dinos there currently, we actually have a video where we have one of our resident experts going through all the dinos. So kind of that virtual experience. Won't lie, we bit a little off of the Disney World experience where they were starting to do virtual rides, which was great. So we were kind of tagged on to do virtual experiences in the park. And that's at ZooTampa.org.
Yeah,
Todd, is Ripley's doing anything? with all
Yeah,
of the
actually,
products?
we are. We've kind of broken it into two segments. We've got Ripley's aquariums at home and outside the auditoriums. So we've got our aquarium brand, which we're doing a number of social media interactions with, and everything from shark feedings, and we're going through a little more depth of what we do behind the scenes, to having some of our general managers do story time. Ripley's, obviously, we have a publishing arm, so we have our own books, and we're out there, and the GM will read a story online to some of the kids that are watching, and keeping them engaged with our conservation and education message. The auditorium side, just the other day, we had a tour of our warehouse, which is here in Orlando, and huge response to that, because it was a sneak peek into what the guests normally don't see. We typically wouldn't show that, but in this trying time, we felt that it was the right time to unveil a little bit of what happens in the backstage areas of our attractions and at our warehouse, and they could see some things that aren't on display, how we go about curating some of our exhibits, and how we're going to be looking at sharing them with the market when we reopen. So those are definitely areas in which we're focused in right now, keeping our market engaged, finding new ways to get them interested in what we're doing, and staying top of mind, because at some point we will be reopened, and hopefully those folks who are sitting at home right now, maybe a little cooped up, are able to connect a little bit closer with either the aquarium brand or our Ripley's Believe It or Not brand.
And Amber, what's happening in Denver? I'm sure that you have a strong online presence right now.
We do, and that ZooTampa, our webpage also launched a couple days ago, and due to popular demand, Baby Rhino Cam 24/7, you can go in and check out what she's doing anytime. So we launched it last night, super popular, and she's pretty cute. So.
Okay, I'm just curious, what kind of rhino is she?
She's a greater one-horned rhino, so she's Asian.
She's an Asian. Oh wow, very cool. All right,
Yeah.
sorry, I have background with rhinos. I like them a lot. They're super cool. So anyway, so you guys have all mentioned that you're wanting to make certain that there's gobs of new and exciting reasons for people to return. Has there been any discussion about, or do you have any opinions about what people can be doing from an operational or what the large attractions can be doing from an operational standpoint to kind of redefine? Because I really think that when people come back, there's going to be a new normal for operations and guest interaction. And has there been any discussion or any plans, or what should we be discussing is probably the best question, about how to redefine what that guest experience is?
Yeah, I can start. So we're definitely anticipating that social distancing isn't going away anytime soon. Before we close, we were able to do about 3 days of time ticketing, which is unusual for us. It's just something we haven't typically done. And so we were able to test some things out. Our buildings have mostly been closed on site while we were nearing kind of the end of when we went to a full closure, because people not wanting to be inside in spaces together, but definitely taking that social distancing lens to the experience and looking at time ticketing and limited attendance as we go into the year. And then does that mean some extended hours? We have our Lego, so we have a traveling exhibit starting in July. So does that mean we can go 8 to 8 and do extended hours and some of those things with those limited tickets, adding hand washing stations, mobile ordering, just how do we limit the amount of lines and close contact spaces as much as we can for people when they come back to see us.
I'll jump in and give you a perspective from my previous life, not currently at Ripley's, but working in Hong Kong for many years. The Asian markets are a bit more in tune with the epidemics or the pandemics, obviously with SARS and a few others kind of going through those locations pretty rapidly, almost 20 years now. So they're very well prepared. And when I was at Ocean Park in Hong Kong, we had some very specific procedures and policies in place to both manage it as it was starting and then how to reopen. Obviously, you're looking at how your staffing are going to be situated, You're going to have a very visible presence in terms of cleaning, even when you reopen, with handrails and in terms of the janitorial or custodial side of the business. Capacity management, queue line management was going to be very important. And you know, in a larger park where you're going to have large groups of people kind of waiting in certain areas, you had to look at those things in everything from ventilation to the hand washing stations that Amber mentioned, and the more common things. So it's training your staff to be cognizant of how that's going to be interpreted by the guests when they come back. They need to be, you know, empathize with the concerns that are going to be out there. Your guest services are going to be, you know, getting a lot of questions about how you handle those things, and it's best to have your team trained and prepared to answer those questions.
Alex, do you want to tag on anything there?
Yeah, I mean, basically what Todd and Amber have said is the general rule of thumb is make sure that the cleanliness of the park and the maintaining that cleanliness of the park is forefront and people are seeing it. ZooTampa has the luck, the privilege of being primarily an open air park. So like what Amber was saying, right before we went to full closure, we did test some things. We actually hired more staff to come in and be more visible about cleaning. So they literally were hired to walk around and just clean heavily touched areas. And kind of, they were told, you know, be in a place where people can see you so they know we're doing it. We also advertised it through our social media and letters to our memberships or our members. But yeah, moving forward, I think all of the interactions are going to have to keep this in mind. To really encourage that, you know, we don't touch each other, we fist bump, we elbow bump. But like Amber said, it's the social distancing is not going to go away for quite some time. And it kind of reminds me of a funny meme I keep seeing around whenever everybody says, you know, oh, now that COVID's here, we're supposed to wash our hands. What were you doing before?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's all of a sudden we're doing everything we were taught to do in kindergarten. Is wash your hands regularly, keep your hands to yourself, cover your mouth when you sneeze. I just kind of want to look and go, duh, you know.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, you know, these are all things that have become very, very important. And in fact, one of my clients even went so far as I'm working for another educational organization that I'm installing 2 new educational shows, and they've even asked, what if people don't want to sit in a 200-person theater? How do we adapt this? You know, what are the new products that this is going to open up for us? And I was just wondering if you guys have even gone, because I mean, that's a pretty radical change. You know, if you're used to doing presentations for large groups of people and all of a sudden their perception is it's not safe to be in this crowded environment. You know, I know, Amber, you had mentioned trying to do everything to reduce lines. What about, you know, have any of you had any plans to rethink the way guests gather to experience the actual attraction itself? You know, with your baby rhino, for example, I'm sure that once you reopen, people are going to be crowded around that thing wanting to see it. So has there been any discussion or thoughts, or do you have any thoughts in regards to how do we reposition people for the big stuff that they're coming to see? Amber, I think you're talking, but you're muted.
Oops.
Oh, unmute. Sorry.
I saw your lips moving, but wasn't hearing anything. Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of Zoom. Okay.
So yeah, it's a great point. We have a couple of large amphitheaters as well. And so how do we figure out how to, you know, cluster family groups and keep distance then for other folks? Certainly adding staffing in those areas to be able to assist with separation of people. We also, last summer or the summer before, had started creating some more intimate, if you will, animal experiences where we felt like our keeper teams could really share our conservation messages and some of the animal stories a little bit better in more frequent, smaller types of experiences. So we've been rolling those out for the last couple of years, and have actually this summer are opening a new theater space, but it was intentionally designed with 3 or 4 smaller, more intimate components. The big shows, though, you're right, that host typically 500 or 600 people, we're gonna have to figure out to, you know, like the Costco lines on the ground of how do you mark that 6 feet and make sure that people are being conscious of it. And I mean, what's interesting is to go out in public now, kind of whether you're in the parks or not, people are pretty conscious of trying to keep distance from others. And so I think if we add some staffing in some of those areas to kind of assist with it, but I think for the most part, people are also trying to do it. I could see us also doing some more virtual stuff, some more streaming online or through our app of some of those types of demonstrations that we do on a pretty regular basis.
Gentlemen, any other things to add there?
Just one of the things we're looking at in some of our attractions is, we have a lot of high touch interactives that our guests are encouraged to go and touch and play with and explore. And, just a couple of days ago, we were talking with our innovation team about, what's the next generation of that? How do we evolve some of those? I think there's always going to be some of it, and that on an operation side, that's going to have to be, cleaned and hygienically maintained. But we're also looking at how can we have that engagement and that interactivity without the physical touching of a screen or a knob or something of that nature. I don't have an answer for it, but it's certainly something that's on our priority list to explore and determine what is that next step for us.
Right. I think we're in a position now where, there is no solid, clear answer. There is no magic bullet right now. But I think what's really important for panels like these is to let's start thinking about what the questions that we need to ask, because we can't find the answers unless we ask the right questions. And I think you're exactly right. If you've got either a large capacity theater or a high touch interactive experience, what you use the word evolution, Todd, which I think is really smart. What is the next evolution of that? And I think that's exactly what we should be asking and start to wrapping our brains around. We have, like I said, we have quite a few participants, and some of them have been asking questions. We've been talking about some of them. Let me go to our Q&A here. What do you think about the impact of global recession on this industry? Which is kind of my next question. Can the industry recover? And I know that's a real doom and gloom kind of question, and I don't expect us, any of us to be looking into a crystal ball, but, can the industry recover? And if so, what steps need to be taken? How drastic a step needs to be taken? What's your opinion?
I firmly believe.
Hey, Siri, will we recover?
It's as good as any.
Right? I firmly believe the industry is going to bounce back. If you think back to the recession, 20 years ago? The industry definitely took a hit, and there was modifications made on the employment side of things and kind of how they managed their budgets and what they spent money on, which then slowly the companies and the theme parks and everybody in the industry started to rebuild to where we've been recently, where, we're putting money into great events and putting money into great experiences and great enclosures and great just everything, right? I think we're going to see some of that pulled back, but the industry itself is going to survive, and it'll be kind of like what it was 20 years ago, where it's going to take 2 steps back, but hopefully take 10 or 11 steps forward as it grows again.
No one else wants to comment.
Yeah, no. No, definitely. I agree with that. I think there are going to be some serious bumps along the road, and unfortunately, there will be some attractions and some companies that do have to close, or they're consolidated with some of the larger organizations. But there will be a recovery. I think it will be slow. I think you're going to see the regional destinations come back quicker than those international destinations. Right here in Orlando, I think is going to be a bit of a challenge, because there's going to be hesitancy for, international travel for the middle-class family that's been impacted financially to plan that, 5 or 6 day trip to Orlando and, 4 theme parks, etc. But there will be a need for the extended weekend in Gatlinburg, or in a beach town or something of that nature, where they're looking for that some family time and on a more modest budget.
Yeah, I totally agree. The staycation component is going to be big, and also as we start to be able to come out of it and reopen, you know, as we look at guest motivation and why people come to visit us, they come to be with their families and friends and be outdoors. And, you know, right now it's so tough to be outdoors. You know, here our bans allow us to go out into parks and be outside, but we've had 2 major snowstorms since we've been closed. So, you know, it's just kind of the battle of either the weather or, you know, or being forced to stay in your house. So, you know, we're definitely hearing from our guests on social media and so forth that they can't wait to be able to come back and just to be outside and, you know, see the animals and be with their families and stuff again. So I think it's going to be slow. And I do think it's going to be, you know, focused in that regional aspect. But the toughest part is going to be, can you get through with the budgets you have, the expenses you have in the meantime to be able to open back up when we're allowed to do so?
Yeah, it's interesting because your comments here have sparked a really interesting question from one of our participants. Felix is asking, what do you think will be affected more? Smaller, more affordable events or larger events? Is it going to hit, and I think you touched on it a little bit, I think everybody's touched on it a little bit, is that, you know, those staycations are going to be the first thing to, I think, recover. But, you know, what about the larger attractions? I mean, you know, is it, and should the larger attractions focus on smaller things to bring back? I mean, you know, I'm looking right now thinking Halloween events in a theme park or Christmas events in a theme park, their planning stages and their installing stages have all been completely upended. So in your opinion, who's gonna come out of this least scathed, I think is the question.
I don't know that it's least, you know, it's going to be one of those interesting dynamics. Us as a nonprofit, right? We're struggling with trying to figure out budgets and, you know, and money, and just to make sure that obviously we can care for our animals during this time. I think we're going to come out of it probably much more quickly than some of your bigger attractions with a higher price point. But we're going to struggle to get through it and survive it more than they will, I think.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, you know, we've been able to use this downtime a little bit to keep that planning moving forward for seasonal events. So that's been a nice silver lining to the situation. But to Amber's point, I hope the consumers are a little forgiving, because I think you're going to see, even with the staycation resorts or the big guys, you're going to see a diminishment in what new they can provide in the events this year and how big they can go. So I think you're still going to see these events, but I don't think you're going to see them to the scale we've seen them in the past, not for a while. And my hope is that consumers understand the situation and are forgiving and still show up and support their parks and the things they love about those parks. The realistic side of my head says they're going to still say, you know, this was the same as last year. I want more, I want more, I want more. And my plea to the industry is going to be to push back a little bit and say, hey, stay with us. We're going to get there again. But my fear is the consumers are going to want more. And because of the financial straits that a lot of these parks are going to be put on, it's going to be hard to provide what the consumer's looking for a little while, but we're going to do the best we can.
Yeah, I would completely agree with both Alex and Amber. And I think, you know, not just on the industry side, but we have to think about the disposable income that's going to be available for our typical consumer. I think the larger parks, the larger attractions with a higher price point are going to have to look at that in the near term. I think they're going to be able to invest to a certain degree. Many of them, you know, have those, you know, corporations that can back them to a certain level of investment. Whereas some of the smaller attractions, the seasonal operations may not have that investment, but they're also at a lower price point. So I think if you're able to put out a good quality product, even though it may not be huge scale, I think at a modest price point, you're still going to get your guests to come, whether it's, you know, for a Halloween seasonal event or Christmas or something of that nature. I think it'll be, again, 12 to 18 months before we start to see the type of numbers at the larger destination parks.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because all of a sudden the question and answer is just blown up because everybody's, you know, diving in here. I'm going to try to lump some of these together if I can. So forgive me if I'm not looking directly at the camera while I'm doing this. I think we've already talked a little bit about the shift in strategy for when you reopen, and I think we've talked about finding ways to make smaller, more intimate experiences. Think about the evolution of things that we already have. Oh, I don't know whether I want to. We'll get to that one. Anonymous attendee, don't worry, we'll get to yours in just a second. But that's a big question. Here's one that I really like. Philip has asked, how big do you think the need will be for a return to nostalgia and tradition for the comfort of what we knew before COVID? Which I think is an interesting question, because I think, as we all are starting to recognize, this is a game changer. This is kind of a reset for the industry as a whole. And how much do you think people are going to crave that that comfort food of entertainment?
They're going to need it, and they're going to want it, and they're going to get out. I can tell you right now, I've been cooped up for about 2 weeks, and as soon as any bans are lifted, I'm going to go out and I'm going to visit all the parks I miss and take my 4-year-old out so that I can let her run free in nature and not in this confined home. So I think the nostalgia is going to be a huge, huge part of that. Of people are going to want to get back to feeling like, it's ZooTampa, it's Zoo Denver, it's Disney, it's Universal. Like, I feel like everything's good. I'm back where I can just have fun and not have a care in the world. I think that's gonna be really important for the world's psyche, and I think it's gonna be really important for the industry to kind of push that and be like, hey, you guys can get back out. We'll welcome you with open arms. And I'll be interested to see what kind of deals and kind of cool stuff the parks and the industry can come up with to entice people to come back and engage in that nostalgia, as Phil said.
Great. Another comment or another question that came up is, let's see. Todd asks, do you think your or any venues will open at the government recommended all clear dates, or will the organizations make internal decisions on reopening? So in other words, I know we're all following what COVID is, or what the CDC is saying and what all of our government standards are. Where does that weigh? I mean, is it 100% up to the government, or are there internal discussions going on as well? And how do those weigh out?
Interesting question, certainly. And as we, it's one that we've been trying to kind of figure out. I'm assuming, like most cities, we're in a space where we have a mayor who has one idea of restrictions and a governor who has another. And so it's, which one supersedes the other, and how do we, or where do we as an attraction fit within the scope of the things that the bans that they're putting into play? So we've been playing off of an idea of opening in mid-May, because our bars and restaurants right now are closed through that standpoint. But, we really just aren't sure. We are also a city-owned facility, although we're run by a nonprofit organization. So also trying to understand really who has the governance, as to when we open and when we can't do so.
So it sounds like it's kind of a balance. You're weighing what the government is saying, and then also looking at the situation from what you know to be true in your own park. Yeah.
And maintaining the social distancing component. The one reason we stayed open for time ticketing for several days longer than the museums and so forth around was because we're an outdoor venue. And so we had been told during that time that as long as we could maintain the 6 feet distance, that we could stay open. That changed a few days later, but we're wondering if that aspect will come back.
Yeah, I know here in Tampa, for example, we're under a safer at home order, which basically means that non-essential businesses can be open as long as they follow the CDC regulations of no more than, I think it's 6 to 10 people in a store at any given time, and 6 feet distancing and all that. But that's so very hard to regulate with guests. So I think it's important. I agree with you. I think it's important to look at the recommendations and recognize what each individual organization can do in order to meet those regulations. Todd or Alex, do you have anything to add to that as far as where that balance falls?
I would say, for us, it's going to be case by case. Obviously, we're in 30 plus markets around the globe, and each one is going to be different based on what's happening on the ground there, the jurisdictions in those particular locations. But it's certainly being reviewed on a regular basis by our executive team.
Great. Yeah, I
And
think that's.
I'd just like to add real quick, Scott, like, please know every one of these theme parks and zoos and attractions wants to reopen as soon as possible. We're not sitting here and doing this because we want to. We're doing it because it's the right thing and the safe thing to do to make sure we can flatten this curve. But please know this industry wants to be up and kicking and raring to go again.
That's great. We're starting to get into our wind down time. I have a lot of questions here specifically about Halloween events. And what I'd really like to suggest is we are going to do right after this panel at the next, depending on where you are, 10 o'clock Pacific time or 1 o'clock Eastern time. We are going to be doing a panel on Halloween specifically. So I'm hoping that you'll tune into that and hopefully we can get some of those questions there. Here's the tough one. Here's a tough question. I'm sorry to end on such a difficult challenge, but this did come from one of our participants. Where did it go? There it is. Well, now I can't find the exact wording, but I'm going to paraphrase. Sorry. What advice or suggestions do you have for the short term for those people who have recently been furloughed, let go, freelancers who require these kinds of industries to keep like me, to try to keep their cash flow going? What are some things that you would recommend for the people who are in those particular situations based on your perspective from the park or the zoo or the attraction?
Well, first thing is stay involved. Don't drop off the grid. I know it might be easy to do that and grab something to drink and sit and just kind of watch the birds fly by, but I think you have to get out there. You're going to have to network, and when I say get out there, virtually get out there. Just like this webinar, there's a number of our industry organizations that are putting together resources and virtual gatherings to connect people. Whether it's IAPA or TEA or you name it, they're all out there. And we as an industry, do kind of come together when times like this. And I think that the most important thing you can do is stay engaged, learn as much as you can. If it's a new skill, there's a lot of new online courses that are being offered for free. You can get out there, take advantage of this time. It might be, tempting just to say, you know what, I'm going to watch Tiger King or whatever for the third time, but it's really about getting out there and connecting with the people who are on the ground. You never know who you're going to meet virtually that can connect you with that particular project that may put you in the right direction. So that's all I could do.
Todd, two things. Number one, that's exactly why we are doing Virtually Prepared. It's to keep people connected so that when the time comes that we are needed, we are there and we all know that we're here for each other. And secondly, I was waiting until somebody mentioned Tiger King. That's why you saw me take a drink. It is a drinking game now. And unfortunately, this is just sparkling water. But that was the first Tiger King reference. So here's to you.
And just for anybody that's not in Florida, I want you to know Tiger King is not a true representation of Floridians. It is a subsect of Floridians.
Unfortunately, as a Floridian, I would say it is a true representation of a small faction.
There are some, yes.
Yeah, there are some. Well, okay. So I'm sorry, Amber. Did you want to add something to that?
Just one quick thing. So from a perspective of hiring freelance and so forth, I think thinking about your business and the product as dynamically as you can. So, I might not be able to add a ton of new things for our Zoo Lights programs, but I might be hiring folks to come in and add smaller elements. So maybe it's portions of a program to add and try to spruce up something, but versus like whole shows or those kinds of things. Also, I think, for us, with some of our layoffs and furloughs, we did lay off our creative team. And so as we start to hire folks back on, it's, whether we're going to need to do that through contract or hiring full-time staff or those kinds of things, I can't predict that right now. but staying in touch and just being able to how to think about that really creative and dynamically for your business, I think is going to be important.
Excellent. Well, guys, you know, first of all, I want to thank all three of these panelists for their time, for their experience, and for their candor in sharing where they're coming from and how they view the industry. Todd Hougland from Ripley's Entertainment, Alex Crow from ZooTampa at Lowry Park, Amber Christopher from the Denver Zoo. For those of you who are listening, this is just the very first of 3 different panels. The next panel coming up is on haunted attractions specifically, and we've got some great panelists there. And then the next panel is going to be about vendors and getting the stuff to the attractions and getting the word out there that the vendors are still alive and hopefully will be by the time this is all over. I was going to take this time to recap everything that everybody said. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I just want to sort of sum things up, and I think this was something that was mentioned by everybody. And I'm going to sum it up in a very simple phrase that I've been using a lot right now. During this time, please don't panic, pivot. Because there is a way through this, there is a way around it, and if we all work together as an industry, I think we're going to get there. So guys, thank you. Panelists, thank you. Participants, thank you very much. And hopefully some of you I will see in about 15 minutes on the Haunt panel. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks, Canton. Thanks.
There are still some people left here. Yeah, if anyone needs the links, refer back to your email. You should have the directory, or you can go through the agenda on our main page to get into the next panel. We're going to go ahead and shut this stream down. And again, this whole recording will be available afterwards, as well as notes from the discussion. So, thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.